Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Happy Resurrection Sunday, everybody. Let's pray, and then we will jump into our lecture this morning. Lord, thank you so much for your Son. His death was necessary for us, as well as his resurrection. The resurrection is indeed an amazing thing. It is the most amazing thing that has ever happened. And because of this, our hope is sure. I pray, God, that this would be beneficial, that this would be profitable, and that you would be glorified in this as we seek to understand your word and be reminded of this and be ever encouraged. For it's in your Son's name. Amen. Okay, let's jump right in to our discourse this morning. I refer to the resurrection of Christ, the greatest thing that God has ever done. It is very, very important and seminal that Christ has died for our sins. That is sure. But if Christ never rose, that's a problem, right? It would be a problem for us as well, because the very fact of our future hinges on Christ being resurrected also, right? It underscores that God is approved of what Christ has done, and it also reflects back to our future and our hope as well, due to the fact that Christ has indeed not only died for us, but resurrected as well. It justifies God's word. All of these other things that are hinged upon this. In fact, our being resurrected from the dead again hinges on the reality that Christ himself has been resurrected from the dead. And as you would have it, we find that Paul underscores this reality in 1 Corinthians 15. Okay? Let's go ahead and turn there and take a look at this. Paul, writing to the saints of Corinth, discussing the resurrection as a matter of fact, okay, writes this. It says, "Now I make known to you all, brethren, the gospel which I preached to you all, which also you received, and which also you stand, by which also you are saved, since you hold fast the word which I preached to you, unless you believed in vain. For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he was raised on the third day according to the scriptures." I find this very fascinating that Paul refers to the scriptures. Now, we here have the full canon, right? But Paul is writing this in such a time where that canon is not complete. Okay? We have the writings of the apostles, John, Peter, even Paul. But Paul is writing this when the scriptures aren't completed yet, right? And yet he refers to these writings as the scriptures. Well, the question follows, what scriptures is he talking about, right? Of course, the answer is all of the scriptures concerning the Hebrew scriptures that speak specifically of the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. The thing that Paul had to instruct, that is all the apostles really, was Jesus's words, and those words corresponded to the Hebrew scriptures, what they had, right? Of course, in the last hour, Will had looked at some Psalms and things like that. And of course, the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ is replete through all of the Old Testament scriptures, the Hebrew scriptures, but I want to look at one such scripture. Could you please turn with me to Isaiah? Isaiah chapter 53. Now, before we actually get started, we're actually going to look at a chapter previous. So we're going to go into chapter 53 of Isaiah, but I want to start in chapter 52 specifically, because I believe that greases the skids for this. Now, actually, I'll go ahead and read it. Chapter 52, verse 13 to 15. It says, "Behold, my servant will prosper. He will be high and lifted up and greatly exalted, just as many were astonished at you, my people. So his appearance was marred more than any man, and his form was more than the sons of men. Thus he will sprinkle many nations. Kings will shut their mouths on account of him. For what had not been told them, they will see, and what they have not heard, they will understand." There are a couple of perspectives here concerning Isaiah 52 and 53. There are some that believe that Isaiah 52 and 53, respectively, combined, are talking about Israel as a nation, that the servant that Isaiah really is referring to in this sense is the nation itself. There are others that also are convinced that this is the prophet Isaiah. Well, Isaiah is indeed the human author, but that God is referring to Isaiah in this text as well. Is that true? Well, let's go ahead and begin, like I said, as I mentioned, in Isaiah chapter 52, and we'll start with the first statement. "Behold, my servant will prosper." Okay. Isaiah in chapter 52, verse 13 of this text starts with a demonstrative particle, behold, right? Hene is the Hebrew word here. This particular particle here directs the reader or the audience to be attentive to this message. It's like when someone goes, pay attention, right? That's kind of the idea. Listen, you know what I'm saying? Stay fixed on this. So behold, my servant. He begins to describe the one whose name my servant. What is my servant? Let's look at this statement more closely in this text here. This is the Hebrew word here, my servant. It is made up of two words. Now, you can't see that, but I sure can. One part of this is the yod, which is that lovely little statement right there, the yod. This letter in Hebrew, combined with this word, is what is known as a pronominal, or what we would call a pronoun in our language. It is in the first person singular, which is translated my, personal possessive, right? The other word here that is combined with this yod here is the word eved, okay? This word, again, occurs over 800 times in the Hebrew scriptures, and it occurs 40 times in the book of Isaiah, okay? Now, it would make sense that an individual who would say that my servant refers to Israel or to Isaiah, it would make sense that people would believe that because this word eved is used of Isaiah, verse 23. It is used of Israel as a nation, verse 41, or chapter 41, verse 8. And it is used as a description of the servant of the Lord in verse 42, or chapter 42, verse 1. Okay? However, there's more details in chapter 52, is there not? We find in the immediate context some of the things that is going to occur concerning this particular servant. For example, the servant will be exceedingly extolled and exalted. This is verse 13 of chapter 52. Behold, my servant will prosper. He will be high and lifted up and greatly exalted. That sounds familiar if you know your Hebrew scripture or your Greek scriptures. We find in verse 14 that the servant's sight and form would be greatly disfigured. Look at verse 14. Just as many were astonished at you, that is my people, so his appearance was marred more than any man. That's fascinating. This servant, it would appear, cannot be Israel as a nation, since God, through Isaiah, is making a comparison with the Hebrew pronominal second person singular, you all, that is, just as many were astonished at you, so with the preposition all. Here Isaiah used this construction to refer to Israel as a single entity. So just as many were astonished at you, right? You all, my people, which is why that's there. So his appearance was marred more than any man, right? Thirdly, the servant's impact on the world itself is found in verse 15. Thus, he will sprinkle many nations. Kings will shut their mouths on account of him. For what had not been told them, they will see, and what they have not heard, they will understand. It's very fascinating that the servant found in this text will sprinkle. The Hebrew word is nazal. We will come back to this in a little bit. Okay? By many of the nations, that is the goyim, right? Authorities will submit to this servant, and all will know this servant. Okay? Now, again, we see this chapter break, but there isn't really a chapter break here. This is a complete thought here that Isaiah is expressing. The thought continues in Isaiah 53, verse 1. Okay? Let's read it. Who has believed our message? Which I find very fascinating here, that the question is in the plural, right? Who's believed, shouldn't Isaiah say, who's believed my message? No, who's believed our message? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? By the way, the phrase arm of the Lord, this particular phrase in Hebrew is used twice in the Hebrew scriptures, and it appears to only be used in Isaiah. This is interesting. Let's look at this phrase a bit more closely here. Okay. So we've established in some respects that it's probably not talking about Israel. Israel is gone, and we'll make that case even more as we go forward here. In Isaiah chapter 51, just a couple of chapters over, we see this phrase mentioned, the arm of the Lord, particularly in verses 9 and 10. It says this. It says, awake, awake, put on strength, O arm of the Lord. Awake as in the days of old, the generations of long ago. Was it not you who cut Rahab in pieces, who pierced the dragon? Was it not you who dried up the sea, the waters of the great deep, who made the depths of the sea a pathway for a redeemed to cross over? First of all, the arm of the Lord is a reference to Egypt. It's not referencing the woman, the harlot from Jericho. That's not what it's referencing here. The term Rahab refers to, it's a Hebrew word for arrogance, proud, boastful, things like that. And Pharaoh, that the arm of the Lord took down Egypt and Pharaoh, right? And that the arm of the Lord, according to Isaiah 51, verses 9 and 10, parted the sea for the redeemed. This is very fascinating here, because the redeemed is Israel. Israel crossed over from the Red Sea, from the Egyptians. Okay? So this definitely, the arm of the Lord cannot be Israel, because Israel was the one that crossed through, right? They're not the ones that parted the sea. They're not the ones who cut off Egypt. Okay? And it can't be the prophet Isaiah either, because I don't remember Isaiah even doing this, right? So it can't be him either. Let's look at Isaiah 53, verse 2. Let's go back here. So this arm of the Lord is also the servant of God. In Isaiah 53, verse 2, we read the following: "For he grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of the parched ground. He had no stately form or majesty that we should look upon him, no appearance that we should be attracted to him." It would appear that the arm of the Lord, that is, the servant, had a humble state and no physical appearance. He was just plain vanilla, right? No gaudiness, no bravado. He was just a plain individual that the appearance of Israel would not desire or be attracted to this man. Very mundane, right? We find that the arm of the Lord, or the servant of the Lord, was reviled and rejected by humanity itself, as we read in chapter 53, verse 3. He was despised and forsaken of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and like the one from whom men hide their face, he was despised, and we did not esteem him. So the arm of the Lord was reviled and rejected by human beings, by humanity itself. The arm of the Lord would be known as the man of sorrows, who would have a knowledge or be familiar with pain or grief. The arm of the Lord, or the servant of God, would not be recognized. He would be reviled. He would be disregarded. He would be rejected by the people. They did not esteem him. Isaiah 53, verse 4, again gives us more information about this person known as the arm of the Lord, or the servant. It says, "Surely our griefs he himself bore, and our sorrows he carried. Yet we ourselves esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted." This is kind of interesting. This is an interesting statement here, and I think that there's something that we miss in terms of this statement. When Jesus came, what did he do? He taught Israel. He informed them. But did he not also heal them too? It says, "The arm of the Lord will bear and carry the griefs." That word griefs in the Hebrew is actually illnesses and sorrows. He did exactly that. We read various accounts in the Gospels of individuals who were sick with leprosy, sick with afflictions, and he would heal them. right? We see individuals who lost loved ones, who were sick on the verge of death, and he would heal them. He would even resurrect individuals from the dead. Think of Lazarus, for example, or the girl that lost her life. He certainly did carry their illnesses and their sorrows. This was a sign to them that this was indeed the servant, the arm of the Lord. Yet the arm of the Lord would also be seen by the people as a man who was cursed or punished by God, smitten of God and afflicted. This underscores again the crucifixion. That to be put on a tree was to be cursed according to the law. And that's exactly what happened. The curse that was supposed to be given to humanity was placed on him. And God smitten him and stricken him. We see this in Isaiah 53:5 as well. But he was pierced through for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The chastening of our well-being fell upon him, and by his scourging we are healed. I find this to be very fascinating. The pierced through for our transgressions is very clear. But crushed for our iniquities is interesting. Okay? The Hebrew word for crushed really could be translated as broken into pieces. Think about what we've been looking at, the upper room discourse, and what they refer to as the Last Supper, when Jesus took the bread and broke it. This is my body, broken for you here. This is the same idea. That the arm of the Lord, my servant, would be pierced, fatally wounded, broken into pieces, crushed. We'll talk about this last hour when you looked at the 7 sayings. For the iniquities, again, these are the illnesses and sorrows he would take from them by this action, and by his scourging they would be healed. The arm of the Lord's chastening is for the well-being, or for the shalom, the peace of the people. And by this wounds, the arm of the Lord, the people are healed. Now, I would like to note something here within this context, that in the immediate context of Isaiah's statement, this concerns again Israel as a national people being healed from their transgressions and their iniquities, which is what the arm of the Lord, it would appear, was pierced through. Why he was pierced through and broken into pieces, crushed. In verse 6, continuing on, all of us like sheep have gone astray. Each one of us has turned to his own way, but the Lord has caused the iniquity of us all to fall on him. Again, in the immediate context of this passage, this is speaking of the nation of Israel, whom Isaiah was going to and proclaiming this truth to. What was the iniquity that the Lord was dying for? I mean, we know that it was sin for sure. But Isaiah summarizes once more, underscored the illness and the pain of the nation of Israel. Again, the impact of their worshiping of idols, the impact of their immorality, the impact of their vehement conduct, of all of this, and the effect of the iniquity of the nation to fall upon the arm of the Lord was in effect due to the fact of Isaiah prophesying this, that the arm of the Lord would do this for them. In Isaiah 53, again, verse 7, going through and looking at this, he mentions he was oppressed and he was afflicted. The arm of the Lord was oppressed and the arm of the Lord was afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that is silent before its shearers, so he did not open his mouth. This is amazing, right? Because we'll have mentioned this last hour. You know, if we were oppressed, how would we respond? I know how I respond, with a lot of explicatives. I would not welcome this type of event. But we find here that the arm of the Lord, that is the servant of God, underscores his willingness to be oppressed or hard pressed. He was willing to go through this. No one is going to do this. But yet we find that he's willing to be oppressed and afflicted. This is why, the way, this word afflicted is the same word that's used in chapter 53, verse 4. Again, Isaiah uses a cultural reference here to get the picture. And I believe it may be more than a cultural reference here, since the arm of the Lord is also referred as the Lamb of God too. Like a sheep that is silent before its shearers. This is amazing. Because I was studying this, I went to YouTube and watched all these videos of sheep getting sheared, right? And they're docile. I mean, ain't nothing going on, right? Nothing going on but the rent with these sheep, right? It's amazing. Even when they're prepared to get slaughtered, they don't respond. It is amazing. Isaiah used a cultural reference to discuss how lambs and sheep, they're docile creatures. Even when they're going to be slaughtered, even when they're getting their wool sheared off, they don't respond. Again, this refers to the willingness of the arm of the Lord, or the servant suffering on behalf of the nation of Israel. Verse 8 of Isaiah 53, by oppression and judgment he was taken away. And as for his generation, who considered that he was cut off of the land of the living for the transgression of my people, to whom the stroke was due. Once more, Isaiah underscores that the arm of the Lord, the servant of God, was mistreated and judged to be guilty, to be condemned, and was ultimately given the death penalty for the people of Israel. Because of this, Isaiah, in kind of a literary technique, gives a rhetorical question concerning the plan of the arm of the Lord to bear the plague. That word there, stroke, is plague. Israel deserved to receive from God. I find it very fascinating, what you had mentioned too last hour, Will, with the continual statement of Jesus to tell the Father to forgive them, right? That he did not, that he basically interceded for God not to intervene in what was happening in accordance with the arm of the Lord. Isaiah 53, verse 9. Let's continue. His grave was assigned to wicked men. Just notice all of this stuff here. I mean, he's bearing griefs and sorrows. He's condemned and judged, and now his his grave is being assigned with those who were wicked. He doesn't belong there. Yet he was a rich man in his death, because he had done no violence, nor was there any deceit in his mouth. He doesn't belong there. And yet he is assigned. He is given this reputation. Isaiah told once more that the arm of the Lord is wrongly accused and mistreated and was buried amongst those who are wicked. As I mentioned before, he doesn't belong there. And yet, due to the fact that he took on all of these griefs and sorrows and iniquities, he is placed there. And we are given that he's not placed there because he did violence, but that he's done nothing. Isaiah 53:10. But the Lord was pleased to crush him. What a statement. Putting him to grief. If he would render himself as a guilt offering, he would see his offspring. He will prolong his days, and the good pleasure of the Lord will prosper in his hand. This is not talking about, the Lord getting, his jollies off and punishing his son. That's not what's going on here. Isaiah was informed that it was God's delight to crush or break into pieces the arm of the Lord, bearing the sicknesses of the people. Why is this? Why would God delight in this? Well, the reason is given in this statement, that this would make the arm of the Lord a guilt offering, a sacrifice for the nation of Israel. And as a result, it would prolong his days. Huh? Wait a minute. Usually when someone dies, that's it, they're dead. But how is his days prolonged? You can't prolong someone's days if they're dead. Isaiah informed that it was the God's delight to crush or break into pieces the arm of the Lord, bearing the sicknesses of the people. This would make the arm of the Lord a guilt offering, and will observe the offspring, the seed of God, and extend his days. This emphasizes that he will, even though he was crushed to death, the arm of the Lord will physically live, and so will his seed. This is amazing. Because of all of this death, doom, gloom, curse, horrid, in the middle of Isaiah 53, we see that this glimmer of hope here, that the one who was crushed to death, the Lord will prolong his days, and his seeds will be prolonged as well. Amazing. Let's talk about the guilt and sin offering for a minute. Since this is mentioned here, the guilt offering or the sin offering was a practice in the nation of Israel, where if the Israelite had sinned by either not being a witness to an occurrence that was evil, I wasn't there, right, when that happened, when you were there, right, or touching an unclean thing from an animal or even a human being, like a dead carcass or something like that, a cadaver, that would make a person unclean. They would have to go before the priest and offer this offering. Or not fulfilling a vow. We just talked about that in Ecclesiastes 5, when you make a vow, right? Kohelet talking to the nation of Israel, don't be lazy in paying that vow, right? Or God's going to hold you responsible for this. Even sins that were unintentional or unaware, they were to offer a sacrifice and take it to the priest. The priest would then slaughter the animal, place some of the blood on the lobe of the right ear, the right thumb of the hand, and the big toe of the right foot. Okay? When it came to the Day of Atonement, it was a little bit more, there was a little bit more things that had to happen. The priest would also take the oil and place it on the right ear, right thumb, and the big toe, which signified the cleansing of the person in the sight of God. This offering was also significant concerning, again, the Day of Atonement, where a high priest would enter into the Holy of Holies once a year. But before he did that, he would have to atone for himself. A bull was sacrificed before the temple. Then the high priest would take the blood, bring it into the Holy of Holies, sprinkle it on the mercy seat, and in front of the mercy seat 7 times, right? That was a sin offering for himself and his house. Then he would come out, take a goat, slaughter that goat, and then return into the Holy of Holies and do that on behalf, the same thing on behalf of the nation. The guilt or sin offering, after it was given, God's judgment would be stayed for another year. Christ is the perfect sin offering for Israel. The arm of the Lord, the servant of God. Verse 11. As a result of the anguish of his soul, he will see it and be satisfied. And by his knowledge, the righteous one, my servant, again, Aved, will justify the many as he will bear their iniquities. Again, once more, Isaiah gave the result of the suffering and the arm of the Lord giving himself as a guilt offering and the outcome of that. He will observe the outcome of this anguish and be satisfied. That is God himself. Because the arm of the Lord, who is known as my servant, again, this is the same word that's used in Isaiah 52, which is why we have to start there. Will justify the many. This is not talking about the collective. This is talking about the nation of Israel, who is referred to in many other texts in Hebrew as the many. Okay? Due to the acts that he has borne Israel's iniquities. Verse 12, continuing on, therefore I will allot him a portion with the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out himself to death and was numbered with the transgressors. Yet he himself bore the sin of many and interceded for the transgressor. The arm of the Lord will be exalted and share the spoils with those who are strong. And again, this is associated with God's offspring, as he mentioned in the previous verses. Again, the reason the arm of the Lord was sacrificed and laid among those who were guilty, he didn't die because he sinned. He became the sin bearer on behalf of Israel. Now, I want to return back to Isaiah 52:15, because there's an interesting word here. Remember how we talked about this particular word, Nazah. He will sprinkle many nations. Isaiah 53 is all about Israel and what he has done on behalf of Israel. But this is an interesting word, Nazah, here. This word occurs 24 times in the Hebrew scriptures. And ironically, this word only occurs twice in the book of Isaiah. The other occurrence is found in Isaiah 63. That's a different context, though. In Isaiah 63, verse 3, we read the following: I have trodden the wine trough alone, and from the peoples there was no man with me. I also trod them in my anger and trampled them in my wrath, and their lifeblood is sprinkled on my garments, and I stained all my raiment. That's talking about the future, right? We're talking blood and guts, so to speak. The second coming, right, where God is going to deal with Israel's enemies physically, okay? So it's only used twice here. It's used in Isaiah 53 and Isaiah 63, respectively. Now, I find the word nazah is very fascinating. The word occurs 24 times in the Hebrew scriptures. The most frequent place this word occurs, this frequent book that this word occurs, is the book of Leviticus. Amazing. When it talks about the sacrifices, particularly the offerings, that you'll sprinkle the blood on this, sprinkle the blood on that, sprinkle this, sprinkle, sprinkle. This is my thought about this word nazah. It would appear that it would seem to fit in verse 14 rather than 15. Just as many were astonished at you, my people, so his appearance was marred more than the form of any man, and his form more than the sons of men. Thus, he will sprinkle many nations. I would say, if I was doing the numbers, I would put verse 15 where the kings are. Because the result of this appearance of the servant impacts the nations, it would seem. The sprinkling of his blood is also for many nations, the Goyim. So we find that in Isaiah 53, Israel is figured prominently. But we see a little statement in Isaiah 52 concerning the effect of the servant's actions that will also impact the nations as well. So let's take Isaiah 52 and overlay it with with 1 Corinthians. For I delivered of you what I've received, what I've delivered of you as of first importance, what I also received, that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures. If we were to overlay 1 Corinthians with Isaiah 53, we could see the death of Christ in Isaiah 52:14, 15, Isaiah 53:5, verses 7 and 8, and verses 10 to 12. All of those reference the death of Christ. And that he was buried according to the scriptures. If we were to overlay this, we would see that the Christ was buried in Isaiah 53:9, if we overlaid that. And that he was raised on the third day according to the scriptures. Now, there isn't a third day mention, but the fact that he rose is significant. And if we overlay Isaiah 53 with 1 Corinthians 4:15, we find 53:10b to 12 underscores this. Oh my gosh, I'm running behind. Speed teaching. Paul, in his discussing the resurrection of the saints, points back to the scriptures. This is important for several reasons. First, it underscores the historicity of the Hebrew scriptures. We can be assured of those. Second, it confirms past prophecies of the Hebrew scriptures. We can trust the future because we know that God has completed the past with the things I mentioned it again last hour when he looked at the 7 sayings and how that fulfilled prophecy. It confirms the eyewitness testimony of Paul himself. Paul saw literally Jesus. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 8, the word appeared, that he appeared to Paul also, is the Greek word arao. Again, 455 times it occurs in the Greek scriptures, and this word is more frequently used to discuss when one sees with their eyesight. It is in the aorist passive, which means that he saw him. He wasn't looking for him, but he saw him, and that this is a statement of fact. He saw Jesus right in front of him. He wasn't a phantasm. He wasn't a ghost. He was right there in front of him in the flesh. And lastly, it supports the future prophecies of the Hebrew scriptures, as I just mentioned. Just real quickly, the resurrection of Christ also underscores all of humanity and their subsequent resurrections. Us in this particular economy, the economy of the lost saints, in Daniel chapter 12, verse 13, he will rise as well. The saints in the great affliction, that's underscored in Revelation 20. And even the wicked at the close of history, they will not resurrect to life, though, but they will resurrect to death. But he will call them as well. And then lastly, it emphasizes the veracity of God's nature. God is truth. His word is truth. These things that occurred in real time in history are truthful, and we can be assured of them. That is it for me. Let's pray. Lord, it is always an awesome thing to look at the Hebrew scriptures and see the work of your Son emphasized and underscored, that this isn't something that happened by accident, that the prophets spoke of this, that the apostles spoke of this, even Jesus spoke of his own death and resurrection in the Gospels. Thank you again so much for this day and how we can reflect that the resurrection of your Son, the arm of the Lord, your servant, secures our hope and the hope of those who believe. Thank you again so much, for it's in your Son's name. Amen.